Good morning. It's still very early in the morning. Everyone's still sleeping. And I have a long day ahead of me. I'm driving to Zanin today. I am speaking in Zanin in Limpopo. I'm very much looking forward to that, to go to my hometown again and to see the people there. But I thought I'd use this opportunity to give you some feedback about our recent liaison trip to Europe, especially to Hungary, where we also made a stop in Brussels, in Belgium, and where we also went to Romania. And I'd like to use this opportunity to give you some feedback about what we did and also some thoughts about the road ahead, some observations from this trip, and as I said, the road ahead. Now, I should say from the start that it's very clear that we are gaining significant momentum in our international liaison efforts, and that this trip was in many ways a highlight for us, in or a milestone for us in our international campaigning efforts. Not only in terms of the meetings that we had and what lies ahead, what we are planning for the future, but also in terms of the observations we made, what we learned, but also what we discovered in terms of how people's conceptions are changing about what's happening in South Africa, about the South African government, and about the Afrikaner people and the work that the solidarity movement are doing. So I was joined by Daniel Maritz from academia. Daniel is a chairperson of the NP van Wyk Centrum, the think tank linked to academia. So Daniel went in that capacity to do liaison and coordination and networking with think tanks and universities to build relations in that regard. Then we were also joined for some part of the trip by Kali Kriel and Ilse Nieuwoud from AfriForum, especially for the Hungary part, of which I will say something in a minute or two. And then, so that there were also some people, some friends who went to Hungary during the same time. We were there for tourism purposes, who joined us at CPAC. It was great to have some form of a delegation there or a bigger team also. So let's talk about what we did, and then I will share some observations and some notes about what lies ahead. So firstly, we attended the NatCon conference in Brussels. That is the National Conservative Conference hosted by a variety of organizations, including the Edmund Burke Foundation, the European Conservative magazine, and I think the Herzl Institute, and some others as well. And so we attended this conference because it was just a few days before the CPAC conference, and also because it's an incredible opportunity for networking, for meeting new people, and it was a wonderful experience to attend. It was a fascinating conference, and I made a video earlier where I discussed the really crazy situation we had where the mayor of that particular part in Brussels tried to shut down the conference merely because they didn't agree with what was discussed at this conference, which is completely bizarre. We've had some really bizarre things happening in South Africa, but we've never had the police showing up to shut down a conference. Now, this was not some extremist or far right conference. It was pretty mainstream conservative, with professors, lecturers, members of the European Parliament, members of various parliaments in Europe, and many others speaking at this conference. But the mayor didn't like the message that was conveyed. They didn't like, for example, criticism about Europe's dealing with immigration over the past few years, and so forth. And so they tried to shut down the conference. But for us, practically speaking, that's not the most important thing about this conference. The most important thing was the opportunities we had to meet people from all over the world, to participate in some of the discussions, and also to exchange, obviously, contact details, but then also to follow up. And we are now in touch with a variety of the people we met there about some potential follow-up ideas, of which I will say something toward the end of this video. So from that, we went to Hungary. Now, Budapest in particular, and there were a few reasons why we went there. The first reason is, and I want to say the most important reason, even though the other reasons are also important, is to attend CPAC. CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Conference, originally hosted by the American Conservative Union in the USA. It is certainly the biggest conservative conference in the world, and it's probably the biggest political conference in the world. In America, I've attended such a conference in America. I believe there were about 20,000 people at this event in Washington, D.C. I don't know how many people attended CPAC in Hungary. It was certainly thousands, 5,000. I don't know if it was more. It's difficult because the conference is not just on one day and there are people coming and going. So we don't know what the total amount was. But I uploaded some photos and videos of the conference and you will see for yourself. It was really, really something spectacular. Now, perhaps I should say at this point that what is striking about what we noticed at NatCon and CPAC is how, firstly, the international conservative movement, if we can use that term, is gaining ground, is gaining popularity, but also how youthful it is, how many young people there are at this conference. Now you have there's this stereotype about conservative people being old people who are stuck in the past. And that's really not the impression you get when you go to these conferences. You see young people in their 20s and 30s who are very successful in what they do, very dynamic and very energetic about what they are involved with. So this is quite exciting to see. Now, the main reason we went to CPAC is because I was invited by the Center for Fundamental Rights that hosts CPAC in Hungary to be a speaker. This is my third time speaking at CPAC in Hungary. Now, I should say, I mentioned that CPAC was originally from the USA, but recently they started spreading it out to other countries. And so CPAC Hungary is the European leg of CPAC. I participated on a panel discussion on the first day, just about an hour or two after the Prime Minister of Hungary spoke. And our panel discussion was termed Woke Busters. So it was a discussion about wokeness in the world and our experience with that in our respective countries, and some comments about how it is manifesting itself, and also what we can learn from this and what we can share from our experiences. Now, I obviously spoke from a South African perspective, and some of the comments I made was that in South Africa, the gender stuff isn't as bad as it is in America and Europe, even though we have it bad in South Africa as well. But the race stuff is much worse. And so we spoke about critical race theory and how it manifests in South Africa, and also what we can do to fight wokeness. But I don't want to go into that too much now because that's a separate topic. And I will upload the panel discussion, the whole panel discussion in a few days on this channel. Then the other wonderful thing about something like CPAC, and especially about being a speaker, is you get access to the speakers lounge. So you have the opportunity to engage with the other speakers, to meet up with them, to do some networking, and to discuss issues of importance. And in our case, a very important issue is, of course, what's happening in South Africa, what's happening with the South African government, how South Africa is changing, and what we are doing under these circumstances and what we have learned under these circumstances. We are, however, not only there to talk about South Africa, we are there to actually do things, to make it practical. And again, I'll make some comments on that later in this video. What I can say, just as a quick observation, is that the world's perspective is changing about South Africa. I remember the first time I went abroad on behalf of AfriForum to register AfriForum with the United Nations Forum on Minority Affairs was in 2012. So that's 12 years ago. And back then, it's not an exaggeration to say virtually nobody knew anything about South Africa. A lot of people didn't know South Africa as a country. They thought it was a region and so forth. And I'm not talking about people you meet in the streets. I'm talking about people in conferences and so forth. Now, when you introduce yourself and you say to them that you are from South Africa, they're immediately interested. They would immediately start talking about what they have heard about South Africa. And they have heard about a lot of things. They've heard about farm murders in South Africa. They've heard about corruption. They've heard about the fact that the ANC government is not the party of Nelson Mandela anymore. At least the ANC doesn't fit that description or that perception. They've heard about load shedding. They've heard about all these things. And there's much to color in, so you could say that they have sort of a broad stroke idea about what's happening in South Africa, but they still have a lot of questions. So there's great room for firstly conversation, but then for channeling that towards cooperation, working on some joint projects. Another wonderful thing about this conference is I'm not sure how they choose the list, but I was invited to a cocktail event or a dinner event at the Prime Minister's house, where I actually met the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, and we were able to have a short conversation, maybe a minute or so, about who we are, about the Afrikaner people, the solidarity movement, and about South Africa and what's happening in South Africa. So it was a social gathering. It wasn't a political meeting or a political gathering with an agenda and discussions and so forth. It was very informal and very social, but I'm very honored to have had that opportunity. And also to not only speak with the Prime Minister, but also speak with all the other members who were there, or delegates who were there, representatives from all over the world, members of parliaments, members of the European Parliament, representatives of think tanks, universities, NGOs, and so forth. So then the other big reason we went to Hungary was to launch a book called Afrikaners and Hungarians, or Relations between Afrikaners and Hungarians from 1652 to 2023, written by Ilse Nieuwoud. It was an incredible book. It started out as an idea to do a report on relations between Afrikaners and Hungarians. And it turns out that there's so much that we can say about this topic that it actually became a book. And again, I don't want to go into the detail too much because that's a separate topic. I might do a video on that. I'm going to interview Ilse on this a bit later. I believe it will be on AfriForum's YouTube. So, but it's a fascinating topic. So we released that book, but not only did we release the book, we also released a documentary film, Boers in Carpathia. And we had a wonderful event in Budapest where with a full, the venue was completely full, it was packed, and we released this book and the documentary. So the documentary film deals more or less about the same topic. When we say Carpathia, we reference the Carpathian Basin, which is the mountains or the area between the mountains surrounding Hungary. So Carpathia is a reference to the Hungarian territory, you might call it. And the feedback was incredible, and I would really like for you guys to watch the documentary. It'll be available soon online, and I will obviously share the link. You can already watch the trailer to Boers in Carpathia, but hopefully if you don't watch this video on the day on which it was published or the day after, I'm sure you will be able to find the documentary Boers in Carpathia on YouTube and also on AfriForum TV. Then between this, we had a whole bunch of meetings in Hungary with politicians, with think tanks, members of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Hungarian Parliament, and many others. I won't go into that list now. So we left then from Hungary, we went to Transylvania, which is the northern part of Romania, where we had what you might describe as a fact-finding mission to meet the Hungarian minority leaders in Romania, to engage with them, and also to learn about what happened with communism in Romania. We met the legendary Turkish Laszlo, who started the Romanian Revolution against communism, and it was a wonderful event or opportunity to meet this person and also to talk with him about ideas in which we can raise our concerns and bring our concerns from South Africa under the international community's attention. Now, Turkish Laszlo is not only a legend in Romania and Hungary, he was also the vice chairperson of the European Parliament and a very well-known person in European politics in general. So we're very honored to have been able to spend some time with him. But that's not the main reason why we went to Romania. The main reason is we attended a conference or spoke at a conference in Sepsi St. George, as it's called in Hungarian, or Svinci Georgia, as it's called in Romania, and I believe on Apple Maps and Google Maps and so forth. So they hosted a conference at one of the universities in this city about minority rights, the crisis of minority rights, the problems that minorities face, and what we can do within such circumstances. And the emphasis was especially on the Hungarians in Romania and the Afrikaners in South Africa. So I spoke at this conference about how the South African experiment of the early 1990s promised a better country for all, promised checks and balances, promised minority rights, and how we are not experiencing that in South Africa today, leading, of course, to the work that the Solidarity Movement is doing. Daniel Maritz from Academia also spoke at this conference from his own perspective, from an academia perspective, or a more academic perspective, about the situation with minorities and how minorities should, what we can learn from our situation in South Africa. So this was a wonderful opportunity. Also, again, wonderful to meet a whole bunch of people who are members of parliament in Romania and so forth. And then on this trip, we also met with several universities, again, as I said, think tanks. On our way back, we went to Timisoara, where we had some meetings, some discussions, and then we drove into Serbia deliberately so that we can drive back into Hungary through the border, the notorious southern Hungarian border, where a fence was set up. And we met some people at the border who spoke to us about their experience through the immigration crisis in 2015, 16, and so forth. And it was just startling to hear what the situation was like on the southern Hungarian border, with people showing up in thousands, crossing the border in thousands, especially in the beginning of this problem. People taking over certain territories at the border, claiming that it's Afghan territory and so forth. People arriving with AK-47s at night in the northern cities there. They told us they could hear people shooting each other, different gangs or factions shooting at each other. There was also a battle. People talk about, I think they call it the Battle of Rushka, where there was a clash, from what I understand, between illegal immigrants and the authorities, which of course led to the Hungarians setting up a big fence and very strict border control, for which they were severely criticized initially by the European Union and many other European countries, only to be vindicated later, because now many of these countries who criticized Hungary for setting up a fence and having strict border control are now doing the same thing. So from there we went back and we came back to South Africa. So maybe just a few overarching comments about this trip and about trips like these. So firstly, attending conferences like the 3 we attended during this trip is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. It provides us with the opportunity to do networking, and it provides us with the opportunity to open some doors for future cooperation, for future activities, and to walk through these doors, or to open some doors through which we can walk later. So in such international trips, we talk about, as with many other things, about the difference between input, outputs, and outcome. So input is something that you do. The work that you do is an input. An output is something that happens as a result of the work that you have done, such as being invited to speak at a conference, or arranging, successfully hosting an event, or getting some media coverage, and something like that. But an outcome is something that actually changes as a result of your outputs. So we are focused on achieving outcomes, not merely on inputs. Attending a conference is an input, not even an output. Speaking at a conference could be an output, but we are focused on outcomes. I have mentioned some observations about how people's knowledge about South Africa and the situation in South Africa is increasing, which is very good news. I didn't mention the media coverage we have received during this trip, which was quite significant. I believe I did 2 or 3 television interviews, several podcast interviews, and we have people in Hungary who are helping us now to gather all the news reports that were published about our trip. and we were quite impressed by, just checking if this is still recording. Yes, it is. By this. So we're putting all of that in a report. I'll maybe do a Twitter thread or something on the media coverage that we have received. Then another wonderful thing is this book of Ilse, which is already available in Afrikaans and in English. Verhoudings tussen Afrikaners en Hongare, or relations between Afrikaners and Hungarians. It seems that we're going to get it translated into Hungarian. Several people and think tanks have indicated, or institutes, that they are interested in doing this, and we are now in discussion with the one that we believe is best suited to do this, who are currently reviewing the book, the digital version, and so I'm pretty sure we will launch a Hungarian translation of this book soon. Then we came back with a very long to-do list. In fact, we have an Excel document or a that we're now converting into a report about everything we did, everyone we met, and so forth. And on that document, we have a follow-up list of things that we need to do to follow up with the meetings we had. That list consists of about 85 items. So there's 85 things we need to follow up based on this trip alone. Now, some of it is fairly small. Follow-up is always more than just sending someone a thank you email. It's always suggesting something, sending someone some information they requested, inviting them to visit South Africa, or something to that effect. But then there is a big 7 or a big 8 of projects that we are now engaging with, some really big events that we are following up on, including bringing some very well-known people to South Africa for fact-finding missions to see South Africa, including having some big fundraising events in other countries, including documentary films that we are going to make with some very well-known influencers, and such events. Now, I would like to go through that list, but I don't think it would be proper for me to do this at this stage, because this obviously involves other people who are now following up with their own constituencies. And so instead of going through the list of follow-up activities that we are going to do, I would rather have you wait and see when we implement these activities. But it will include, as I said, a documentary film. It will include fundraising abroad. It will include speaking at other events, publishing certain things, and just raising our platform, strengthening our platform on the international sphere, to bring under the attention of more people, influential people in the European Union, the European Parliament, and people in other countries, including the US, about the situation in South Africa, and then building that up to, again, not just outputs, but outcomes. But we have gotten to learn, once again, the importance of networking, of meeting new people, of spending time with them, and building on that. And then perhaps one last comment, we have also come to learn the importance of our diaspora, of people who have unfortunately left South Africa, but who are now in a position where they can act as ambassadors, where they can raise concerns where they live, where they can talk with local journalists, where they can talk with local politicians, local government representatives, and where they can open doors for us. And we have had some incredible breakthroughs as a result of ordinary people just deciding, I want to do something to help, to make a difference. And we would really like to call on those of you who live abroad. If you watch this video and you don't live in South Africa, you live in Hungary or America or the Netherlands or Australia, New Zealand, Canada, England, or any other country for that matter. If you are willing to help, you should let us know. You can send us an email, you can reply to this video, or you can contact us through social media, and we would really like to involve as many people in this campaign as we possibly can, because certainly there are some very big things ahead for us. And as we can see with the current trajectory in South Africa, more international support is going to be an increasingly important thing in the future.